What would you do if you overheard your own family celebrating your impending death? Would you confront them? Would you cry? Would you forgive them? Well, when I heard my daughter-in-law tell her sister, she'll be gone soon, and good riddance, I didn't have to wonder anymore. The phone call I made next would teach her that counting chickens before they hatch can be a very dangerous game. The afternoon sunshine felt warm on my shoulders as I walked up the familiar stone pathway to my home. I'd just come from Dr. Martinez's office, and my heart was still racing from the news I'd received. After 6 months of uncertainty, after 6 months of watching my family treat me like a ghost already departed from this world, I finally had answers, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to discover about the people I'd loved and trusted most. The silence in my house felt different when I walked through the front door that afternoon. There was something charged in the air, something secretive and hushed, that made the hair on my arms stand up. I set my purse down quietly on the hall table, the medical papers inside crackling softly against the leather. I was about to call out and announce my return when I heard a voice that stopped me cold. "She'll be gone soon. 6 months. Maybe less." The voice was coming from my kitchen, and it belonged to my daughter-in-law, Sarah. She was talking about me, planning my death, celebrating my departure. What she didn't realize was that the dying woman standing in the hallway had just been given a clean bill of health. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so loudly I was afraid she might hear it. Sarah's voice carried clearly through the open doorway, and every word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "The cancer diagnosis was the best news we've gotten in years," she continued, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Finally, some good news in this nightmare. But here's what Sarah didn't know as she sat in my kitchen, using my phone, drinking my coffee, and planning my funeral. Here's what she couldn't see as she celebrated what she thought was my approaching death. The medical report in my purse didn't contain a terminal diagnosis. It contained the words complete remission and no evidence of disease. "I know it sounds terrible," Sarah was saying, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But honestly, Lisa, this house, the money, everything we've been waiting for, it's finally going to be ours. Mom's been hanging on way too long. It's time." The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This was the woman I'd welcomed into my family 12 years ago. This was the woman I'd helped plan her wedding, supported through her difficult pregnancy, comforted when she lost her job. This was the woman I'd loved like the daughter I never had. And she was sitting in my kitchen celebrating my death like it was Christmas morning. "The doctor said 6 months at the outside," she continued, and I could hear papers rustling. "We should start looking at funeral homes soon. Nothing too expensive, obviously. We'll need to save money for the house renovations." House renovations. They were already planning to redecorate my home before my body was even cold. The realization hit me like a physical blow, and I had to grab the wall to keep from stumbling. These people weren't just waiting for me to die. They were excited about it. They'd been planning their life after my death for months, maybe years. But wait, because this is where the story takes its first shocking turn. This is where I learned just how deep their deception really went. "Have you told Michael about the life insurance policy yet?" Sarah asked, and my blood turned to ice. "The one she thinks he doesn't know about?" There was a pause, and then Sarah laughed. Not a joyful laugh, but something cold and calculating that I'd never heard from her before. $300,000, Lisa. Plus the house, plus her savings, plus everything else she's been hoarding all these years. Michael and I did the math last night. We're looking at close to $800,000 total. $800,000. They'd been calculating my worth like I was livestock being appraised for slaughter. They knew about insurance policies I thought were secret. They'd been going through my personal papers, my private documents, planning their windfall while I sat in chemotherapy thinking they were there to support me. "The best part is how guilty she feels about being sick," Sarah continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "She keeps apologizing to us for being a burden. If she only knew how much of a favor she's doing us by dying, she might not feel so bad about it." The words hit me like a slap across the face. Every apology I'd made over the past 6 months, every time I'd felt guilty for asking for help, every moment I'd worried about being a burden, they'd been laughing about it behind my back. They'd been counting the days until my death, like children counting down to vacation. And then I heard something that changed everything. something that turned my grief into rage and my fear into something much more dangerous. "You know what the funny thing is?" Sarah said, and I could hear her moving around my kitchen, probably making herself comfortable in what she already considered her future home. "She actually thinks we love her. She has no idea that Michael and I have been planning this for years, ever since his dad died and left everything to her instead of him. Years. They'd been planning my death for years." This wasn't a recent development born out of frustration with my illness. This was a long-term strategy that had been in motion since my husband Robert passed away 3 years ago. They'd been watching and waiting and hoping for me to die so they could inherit what they felt was rightfully theirs. "Remember when she had that fall last winter?" Sarah continued, and I remembered it well. "I'd slipped on ice and ended up in the hospital with a concussion. Michael and Sarah had been so attentive, so caring, visiting every day and bringing flowers. We were so disappointed when she recovered. We thought that might be it. They'd been disappointed when I survived. When I'd thanked them for their love and support during my recovery, they'd been internally cursing my resilience. When I'd told them how grateful I was to have family who cared about me, they'd been calculating how much longer they'd have to pretend. And don't even get me started on how she's been talking about changing her will lately," Sarah said, her voice taking on an edge of panic. "She mentioned something about leaving money to charity. We can't let that happen, Lisa. Michael needs to convince her to stick with the original plan." But here's what they didn't know about that original plan. Here's the detail that was about to turn their celebration into a nightmare. My will hadn't left everything to Michael in years. I'd changed it quietly 2 years ago. After watching how they treated me during my recovery from surgery, something about their behavior had felt off. Too eager, too interested in my medical prognosis, I'd started leaving money to various charities and setting up trusts that they couldn't access. But I'd never told them about the changes. "The important thing is that we keep playing the loving family until the end," Sarah was saying. "We can't give her any reason to suspect that we're not heartbroken about her condition. She has to believe we're suffering right along with her. I thought about every tear I'd seen Sarah cry over my diagnosis. Every hug, every whispered, "I love you," every promise that we'd fight this together. All of it had been performance art, designed to ensure their inheritance. "Michael's gotten really good at the grieving son act," Sarah laughed. "You should see him with her. He's practically nominated for an Oscar. Yesterday, he actually cried while talking about childhood memories. I almost bought it myself. My son, my beloved Michael, the boy I'd raised from age 8 after his father and I married, the child I'd helped with homework, driven to soccer practice, comforted through heartbreaks and celebrated through victories. He'd been performing grief over my illness while secretly celebrating my approaching death. But the most shocking revelation was still coming. The detail that would change not just my opinion of them, but my entire understanding of the past 3 years. "You know what's really ironic?" Sarah said, and I could hear her opening what sounded like my refrigerator. "She's been so worried about being a burden financially. She has no idea that we've been borrowing against her life insurance policy for months. Michael set it up through his friend at the bank. We've already gotten about $50,000 in advances. They'd been stealing from me. While I lay in hospital beds worried about medical bills, while I cut back on expenses to save money for my family, they'd been secretly borrowing against my life insurance, treating my death as a guaranteed investment. The best part is that she'll never find out," Sarah continued. "The bank paperwork is all in Michael's name, and once she's gone, it'll just be deducted from the final payout. She's literally paying for our vacations with her own death money." This was it. This was the moment when my sadness transformed into something else entirely, something cold and calculating, and absolutely determined. They wanted me dead. They'd been stealing from me. They'd been lying to my face for years while secretly planning their life after my funeral. Well, I had news for them. The dying woman they'd been counting on was about to disappoint them in spectacular fashion. I stood in that hallway for another 20 minutes, listening to Sarah detail their plans for my money, my house, my belongings. They decided which furniture to keep and which to sell. They'd chosen paint colors for the walls. They'd even discussed which of my personal items they might donate to charity, not out of generosity, but to get the tax write-offs. But the conversation that really broke my heart was when Sarah started talking about my health. "The funny thing is, she actually believes she might beat this," Sarah said, her voice full of mock sympathy. She keeps talking about fighting and staying positive. It's almost cute how delusional she's become. Delusional. They thought my hope was delusion. They thought my strength was denial. What they didn't know was that my hope was about to become their worst nightmare. Dr. Martinez told her that attitude is important for treatment, Sarah continued. But between you and me, we all know how this ends. She's 71 years old with stage 3 cancer. The statistics don't lie. But here's the thing about statistics that Sarah didn't understand. Here's the detail about my medical situation that was about to change everything. The statistics she was quoting were from my initial diagnosis 6 months ago. The statistics that applied to my current situation were completely different, because the woman she thought was dying had just received the most incredible news of her life. Complete remission. That's what Dr. Martinez had said just hours earlier. No evidence of these. The treatment worked better than we could have hoped. You're essentially cancer-free, Betty. Cancer-free. Not dying. Not even sick anymore. The treatment that had made me weak and nauseous for months had actually worked. The cancer that Sarah was counting on to solve her financial problems had been completely eliminated from my body. I want to see you every 6 months for the next 2 years, Dr. Martinez had continued. But based on these test results, I expect you to live a normal, healthy life for many years to come. You beat this thing, Betty. You won. I won. And Sarah was about to learn exactly what that victory meant for her carefully laid plans. But wait, because the story gets even more shocking. Because while I was standing in my hallway listening to my daughter-in-law plan my funeral, I was also formulating the most satisfying revenge of my life. We should probably start acting more sad around her, Sarah was saying. Really start grieving early so it looks natural when the time comes. Maybe I should start crying more when I visit. Start crying more. She was planning to increase her performance level to seem more convincing. She was going to look me in the eye and weep fake tears over my condition, while secretly celebrating my approaching death. And Michael thinks we should start bringing up happy memories, she continued. The whole celebrating her life thing. Make her feel like we're already saying goodbye. They were going to torture me emotionally while they waited for me to die. They were going to make my final months miserable with their fake grief and premature goodbyes. They were going to turn my recovery into a guilt trip about how much my survival would disappoint them. Well, I had a different plan. A plan that would teach them about the difference between what they wanted and what they deserved. I quietly backed away from the kitchen and slipped out the front door. I needed time to think, time to plan, time to figure out exactly how to handle the most shocking betrayal of my life. I walked to the small park at the end of my street and sat on the bench where Robert and I used to watch sunsets together. What would you do, honey? I whispered to the empty air, hoping somehow his wisdom would reach me. How do you handle people who've been lying to you for years? But even as I asked the question, I knew what Robert would say. He'd always believed that actions have consequences and that people need to face the results of their choices. He'd also believed in giving people enough rope to hang themselves with. That's when the plan began to form. A plan so perfect, so poetic, so absolutely devastating, that it made me smile for the first time in months. I was going to let them continue believing I was dying. I was going to let them dig their hole deeper and deeper until there was no climbing out. And then, when they'd revealed the full extent of their betrayal, when they'd shown me exactly who they really were, I was going to resurrect myself and watch their world crumble. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep this deception went. I needed to know everything they'd done, everything they'd planned, everything they'd stolen. I needed evidence. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, David Richardson. We'd been friends for 30 years and he'd handled all my legal affairs since Robert died. David, I said when he answered, I need to ask you something confidential. Has Michael ever contacted you about my will or my estate planning? There was a pause that told me everything I needed to know. Betty, David said carefully, I think you should come in to see me. There are some things we need to discuss. Is he asked about my life insurance policies? Another pause. Yes, he has. Several times. He seemed very concerned about making sure all the paperwork was in order. My son had been checking up on his inheritance while I was fighting for my life. He'd been making sure his payday was properly documented while I was lying in hospital beds, wondering if I'd see another Christmas. David, I need you to do something for me, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions in my chest. I need you to prepare some documents. I need to change some things. Betty, are you sure you're in the right frame of mind to make major decisions? I know your diagnosis has been... My diagnosis has changed, I interrupted. I'm in complete remission. No evidence of disease. I'm going to live for many more years, David, and I need to make sure those years are spent around people who actually want me alive. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Finally, David spoke. My God, Betty, that's wonderful news. Congratulations. Thank you. But I'm afraid the celebration will have to wait. Right now, I need to focus on cleaning house. And by that, I mean cleaning out people who've been secretly hoping for my death. But here's where the plan gets truly brilliant. Here's where my 30 years of watching human nature was about to pay off in the most satisfying way possible. David, I want you to prepare 2 sets of documents. The first set should make it look like I'm getting sicker and need to finalize my affairs quickly. The second set should be the real changes I want to make to my estate. I want to see exactly how far they're willing to go when they think I'm dying. Over the next 2 weeks, I became the most convincing dying woman you've ever seen. I started walking slower, eating less, and complaining about fatigue. I mentioned doctor's appointments that I never actually had, and test results that were completely fictional. I talked about pain that I wasn't feeling and treatments that I wasn't receiving. And Michael and Sarah? They ate it up like starving people at a banquet. Mom, you look so tired, Michael would say, his voice dripping with fake concern. Are you sure you're getting enough rest? I'm fine, sweetheart, I'd reply weakly, watching as his eyes lit up with what he thought was compassion but was actually anticipation, just taking things one day at a time. Sarah was even more transparent. She started bringing me meals. I didn't need an offering to help with household tasks I was perfectly capable of handling. She'd sit by my bedside for hours, holding my hand and telling me how much she loved me, all while internally calculating how much longer she'd have to keep up the charade. Is there anything you need, Mom? She'd ask, her voice full of practiced sympathy. Anything I can do to make you more comfortable. What I needed was for her to stop lying to my face. What would have made me comfortable was knowing that my family actually cared whether I lived or died. But instead, I smiled weakly and told her how grateful I was for her support. But the most shocking moment came when they started pushing me to finalize my will. Mom, Michael said one evening as we sat in my living room, I know this is hard talk about, but Sarah and I have been thinking, maybe you should make sure all your legal affairs are in order. You know, just in case. He was asking me to prepare for my death while pretending to hope for my recovery. He was encouraging me to make it easier for them to inherit my money while acting like a loving, concerned son. I've been thinking the same thing, I said, putting on my weakest voice. It would give me peace of mind to know everything is handled properly. The relief on their faces was unmistakable. They thought they'd successfully convinced me to speed up my own estate planning. They thought they were helping me help them steal my money. David Richardson has been so helpful over the years, I continued. I think I'll call him tomorrow and set up an appointment. Maybe you could drive me there, Michael. I've been feeling so weak lately.
Of course, Mom,
he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand.
I'll take care of everything.
He'd take care of everything. My son was volunteering to personally escort me to my own financial execution. He was offering to drive me to the appointment where I'd supposedly sign away my life's work to people who'd been secretly celebrating my illness. But here's what Michael didn't know about that appointment. Here's what neither of them realized about the papers I was going to sign. The morning of the appointment, I put on my best dying woman performance. I wore my oldest dress, skipped my makeup, and moved like every step was painful. Michael was all solicitous concern, helping me to the car and adjusting my seatbelt like I was made of glass. Are you sure you're feeling up to this today, Mom? He asked as we drove to David's office. We could always reschedule if you're not feeling well. No, sweetheart, I said in my weakest voice. I need to get this done. For my peace of mind. For my peace of mind. If he only knew what was actually going to give me peace of mind, he'd have turned the car around and driven straight home. At David's office, I signed papers while Michael sat beside me, occasionally rubbing my shoulder and telling me how proud he was of me for being so responsible. He had no idea that the documents I was signing would cut him out of my will entirely and leave everything to charities that actually helped people instead of exploiting them. There, I said as I finished signing the last page. It's done. Everything is in order now. You did the right thing, Mom, Michael said, his voice full of false pride. Dad would be proud of how you're handling this. Dad would be proud. My husband would have been disgusted by his son's behavior, but Michael was so lost in his greed that he couldn't see the irony in his own words. But the real performance was still to come. The moment that would complete my revenge and teach them both a lesson they'd never forget. 3 days later, I called them both to come over for what I told them was an important conversation. They arrived together, their faces appropriately somber, probably thinking I was going to tell them I was taking a turn for the worse. Thank you for coming, I said, gesturing for them to sit down in my living room. There's something I need to tell you both. They leaned forward, ready to hear whatever tragic news I was about to share. Sarah even had tissues ready, probably preparing for another Oscar-worthy performance of grief. I went to Dr. Martinez last week, I began, watching their faces carefully. And he had some surprising news about my condition. What kind of news? Michael asked, his voice tight with what they probably thought was concern, but was actually anxiety about their inheritance timeline. Well, I said, letting the suspense build for just a moment longer. It turns out that I'm not dying after all. The silence that followed was absolutely delicious. I watched as confusion, then understanding, then pure panic crossed their faces. Sarah's mouth actually fell open. Michael's face went white as a sheet. What do you mean? Sarah whispered. I mean, I'm in complete remission, I said, my voice getting stronger with every word. No evidence of disease. Clean bill of health. I'm going to live for many, many more years. But here's where the real shock came. Here's where I revealed just how much I knew about their secret plans. I'm also going to live long enough to enjoy the changes I made to my will, I continued, pulling out a copy of the documents I'd signed. You see, I've decided to leave everything to charity. Every penny, every piece of property. Every single thing you've been counting on will go to organizations that actually help people instead of waiting for them to die. The look of pure horror on their faces was worth every moment of pain they'd put me through. But I wasn't finished yet. Oh, and Michael, I said, turning to my son with a smile that could have frozen fire, you'll be interested to know that I've also reported the insurance fraud to the authorities. Borrowing against someone else's life insurance policy without their knowledge is a felony. You'll be hearing from the police soon. Michael's face went from white to green. Mom, I can explain. No need to explain, I interrupted. You see, I heard everything. That afternoon, 2 weeks ago, when I came home from the doctor, I heard Sarah on the phone with her sister. I heard every word about how excited you were that I was dying. I heard about your plans for my house, my money, my belongings. I heard about how disappointed you were when I survived my fall last winter. Sarah started crying, but these weren't the fake tears I'd seen for months. These were tears of genuine panic and regret. Betty, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, standing up and walking to the front door. I understand that you've been lying to me for years. I understand that you've been stealing from me while pretending to care about me. I understand that you've been counting the days until my death, like children counting down to Christmas. I opened the front door and gestured for them to leave. What I don't understand is why you thought you could build your future on someone else's grave and not face any consequences. Please, Michael begged. We can work this out. We can fix this. You're right, I said, my voice calm and final. You can fix this. You can fix this by getting out of my house, out of my life, and out of my will. Permanently. They left that day, and I haven't seen them since. The police investigation into the insurance fraud is ongoing. The charity organizations I chose are already making good use of my donations. And me, I'm living my best life surrounded by people who actually love me and want me alive. Because here's what I learned from this whole experience. The most powerful revenge isn't destroying someone's life. It's simply refusing to let them destroy yours. The most satisfying victory isn't winning a battle. It's choosing to fight for yourself when everyone else has given up on you. And sometimes, the best thing you can do for people who are waiting for you to die is to live long enough to watch them face the consequences of their choices. If this story teaches you anything, let it be this. Never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose except their dignity. And never ever count on someone else's death to solve your problems. Because as my dear listeners now know, sometimes the people you're counting on to die are the ones who end up burying you instead. I have more stories to share about family, loyalty, and the surprising ways life can turn around when you least expect it. So subscribe, share your own stories in the comments, and remember, the best revenge is a life well lived, especially when people are betting against you living it at all.